Most Etsy beginners fail. In today's amazing interview with top Etsy seller Luna Vega, we'll explore exactly why Etsy beginners fail and how you can crush it. Hey, what's up? I'm Michael Chris, top seller at ShineOn, the best print-on-demand company on the planet. In today's video, you're going to learn the rookie mistakes that cause Etsy beginners to fail and what you can do differently to find success. If you'd like to learn more about ShineOn, visit shineon.com or click the link in the description below. Now, enjoy the video.
So actually my story started in 2017. So I was dropshipping and doing print on demand. And back then I was actually doing print on demand t-shirts, like crypto t-shirts, because that was a big thing in 2017. So fast forward, actually at the time I was living in Barcelona and I actually met Eric at a conference, and that's when I first heard of ShineOn. And doing t-shirts and selling them through Shopify, I just didn't have enough margin. So I loved the idea of doing ShineOn and having higher profit margins. So I ended up, I think it took me a little while to get started, but then eventually when I did, my first winner was a Father's Day gift, which I was running traffic to my Shopify store. And then after testing, I just wasn't able to replicate that. Like I was like stuck with that one niche and I wasn't able to replicate it. I even remember I got on a call with Michael and I was like, I don't get it. Because I mean, to be honest, that's the other thing like that I'm going to mention through this is like a lot of us, like either we're like complete beginners or we're experienced. So like sometimes our ego gets in the way. And for me, it totally did. And so I kind of had to take a step back. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to try Etsy. And that was like a completely different like Pandora box and also complete different ecosystem. I kind of had to learn from scratch, but I ended up having a much better time understanding how it worked. And it just made more sense for me than continuing Shopify. So here I am, I guess 2 years later, and super excited to share with you guys like everything I've learned along the way.
That's crazy. I actually remember that phone call now.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Looking back, and it's so funny because looking back, I was like, yeah, no wonder. Like some of the creative that I was putting out there wasn't all that good. And I was also copying, like, and I remember you telling me like, well, maybe that's the problem. I was like, yeah, I guess.
Well, that's awesome. You have been making waves in Etsy. And I know, I don't know if you sell on TikTok or not, but I know you have a huge TikTok profile, which I think we talk about a little bit later. So we can get to that. That's really cool. Well, are you ready to jump into it?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
I just want to go back to like mindset, right? And I think a lot of time we get caught up and have this preconceived notion of what a platform is. And so we think that essentially with Etsy, and simply I know this from a lot of the comments I get on social media or within my Facebook group, is this preconceived notion that it's all about driving traffic to a listing, kind of as you do with Shopify, you're like driving traffic to your listing, and that's why you're not getting sales, because you're not able to drive enough traffic. Well, you need to take a step back and you need to put yourself in the shoe of your customer. Individuals who go on Etsy, they're actively looking for gifts and they also already trust Etsy. And when you are on the Etsy marketplace, it's very different than with Shopify, because essentially when they're on Etsy, you're competing right then and there with all these other sellers based on the keyword that you're ranking for, right? And so this is why you need to think of it very differently and put yourself in the shoes of your customer and really think of your avatar when you're creating these listings. So part of the issue that some are experiencing is that first and foremost, Etsy is maturing. Like Etsy is very different when I started 2 years ago, just like Shopify, TikTok, like anything is maturing, right? So creatives that worked well 2 years ago, obviously don't work well now, right? So you have to adapt and you always have to be in the pulse of things, right? There's definitely more competition, but that's not a bad thing. Like competition should never scare you, because competition means that people are making money in these platforms. So there's plenty of opportunities.
Yeah.
It's harder to get, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people get caught up in like sort of like red ocean versus blue ocean, but red ocean is actually opportunities. It means that there's plenty of opportunities for you to be in the space. marketplace. You just have to think of it differently. You have to think outside the box, right? It's also harder to get sales than it was. Like to be completely transparent, when I first uploaded on Etsy, I had already like 300 listings from all my trials and error. And I was starting to get sales like pretty quickly. However, I had to optimize my listing and understand how Etsy works in order to take it to new heights. Also, the raising cost of advertising, whether, it's TikTok, Shopify, or even Etsy fees or Etsy ads. And then overall, like applying tactics from a couple years ago, like all these platforms are always ever evolving, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, in my case, I'm talking Etsy. So you have to keep all these things into consideration. So overall, Etsy is an amazing source of organic traffic. This is why I absolutely love Etsy. Etsy shoppers are actively looking for gifts, right? Like they're on Etsy, they're ready to shop. Unlike when you're on the Facebook feed where you kind of are interrupting their day-to-day, like Etsy, you already have, I think the latest number I saw is like 96 million users go on Etsy to shop, right? So it's a marketplace. And so when you go on the feeds, obviously like you are competing with other sellers. So you cannot treat it as you would with TikTok or Facebook or Amazon because it's a very different beast. Even though it is SEO driven, it's not as SEO driven as you might think. So there's really always a huge emphasis on keywords like the perfect SEO, the perfect title, and yet those things matter. But if your listing is vanilla and doesn't stand out, you can add all these bells and whistles, you're still not gonna get sales. So that's a problem that I see overall. People spend too much time thinking about SEO, traffic, and all these things, which are nice to have and will help, but that's only 5% of the equation. Because if your foundation, your actual listing doesn't have the substance, you're never gonna be able to get the eyeballs to begin with. So here's what makes me Grinch. I spend a lot of time on YouTube and I have a YouTube channel that I've been working on. And every time I see these tips, I just want to take my coffee and slam it on my forehead. So the first thing is that you need to spend countless hours like creating this beautiful store and upload like 20 Etsy listings. That is not true. People barely go on the actual storefront. If they see something they love, they will purchase it, even if you have no reviews. Because if it's strong enough and it speaks to them as a consumer, they will be all about it, right? So you don't need to, I've seen stores that have the worst banners, the worst branding, and they're pulling in like 50 sales or 100 sales a week. So it's not as much as about branding as you think it is. And actually that's the benefit of Etsy. It's very beginner friendly. This is why I love teaching Etsy, right? It's not as well about only finding low competition niches. So obviously going after a low competition niche does help, right? Because there's less competition, less saturation. But the problem with these low competition niche that nobody talks about is the fact that you're not getting enough traffic, right? So if you're going after a very obscure niche that only has 500 searches a month, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to get those consistent sales. You're going to get maybe a few sales sporadically. And yeah, it helps long term, but it's not going to help you make it to the next level. So that's also really bad advice. Yeah, there's another advice that I've seen like, oh, get your relatives to buy so you can leave a review. You can get sales with no reviews. People trust Etsy. People know if something goes wrong with Etsy, like they can message Etsy directly. This is why like there's issues a lot of times of people getting their store banned when they're starting out, because Etsy has really active bots in place to make sure that you are a compliant seller. So make sure to understand that people trust Etsy as a platform versus when you're dealing with Shopify, you do need to put more work into having like a beautiful website. And thank God you work with ShineOn. Like ShineOn kind of does all the work for you when it comes to having like a landing page that's going to be high converting. Well, with Etsy, the work is done. You don't have to think about that. But where you have to put most of your energy is having that listing that's going to get you eyeballs, right? Then there's this whole other concept of like promote your listing on Pinterest and Instagram and everywhere else and do Etsy ads. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. Obviously it works. But the problem is you spend your time doing this on listings that are completely vanilla. So it's like almost effort lost. If your listing is not getting sales, I don't want you to spend another dime in ads, because Etsy is really good when it comes to organic and able to, and it's going to also help you rank your listing if you have a strong listing, right? But if your listing is not strong and it's just kind of like blending in, obviously it's going to be deranked in the pages, right? So you adding money and traffic and whatnot, it's not going to help you unless you already have a winner. So that's another thing that's a complete waste of time. And then another advice that I've seen that also makes me cringe is, oh, you need to make sure that you price your item lower than your competition. So that's kind of what happens a lot of times on Etsy, is that you kind of see like a price drive to the bottom. And that's not the solution. Guys, I will tell you this, during Christmas and even now, because I was testing this really actively, like adding 20% discounts and whatnot. People were buying my items full price with shipping on top, because also like I started also testing shipping, like adding the shipping fee versus not. And because of the overall Etsy fees and whatnot, I decided to add shipping within the cost, and I no longer offer free shipping, and it hasn't hindered my conversion rate. If anything, it's made it even higher. So do not race to the bottom. Do not follow what other sellers are doing. If it speaks to them, they will purchase it. Next slide.
Hey, something you said here that really stood out to me. You basically said that you can't, like, you don't want to run ads until you have a winner, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very different than you're thinking on Facebook or TikTok, where you're essentially, you have to run ads to see if you have a winner. Here, it's like you're saying, no, make your listings, let the algorithm and you know what Etsy does organically do the work. And if you start getting signals that something is a winner that's getting sales, then you can start to run ads, right? And the ads will help that. It will compound that. But if the listing itself is not already selling organically, you're probably just throwing money away. That's a total paradox. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because like the Etsy algorithm does all the work for you. It will tell you whether or not something has potential. And if it doesn't, and it knows that really quickly, I would say the longest that it takes me to get a sell when I have like a winner is 7 days. Wow. Usually it happens within a day. Yeah. And I know like, okay, I'm in the right direction. That's cool. So at that point, I wait a little longer. And once I know that I have consistent sales, then I start running the ads. And if I only have like a one-off sell, I go back to the listing and I tweak it, because I know, okay, it's there, but not quite there yet. So I look at what I can do to optimize it even more. Wow, but yeah, that's a very different paradigm. Okay, so obviously the problem is like a lot of people apply these back tactics and they get frustrated. And I get it. They think Etsy's the issue. They can't figure out why they're not cracking the code. They're uploading products. They don't really have a strategy in place. They're lowering the product price because they're like, oh, everybody's prices are much lower. They're losing money because they're spending all this money on Etsy ads. Like, I mean, you know, if you have, obviously you're going to be losing money, especially if you don't have a winner. So you really start thinking Etsy's the issue, and you start thinking it's too saturated and there's just no way out of it. But I have the solution for you. Next slide. So couple hard truths first. You do not need to have a niche store. That's another thing that baffles me when I see on YouTube, like, oh, you need to come up with your niche. You need to have a general store. And actually in drop shipping, like, or even with print on demand, that's something that's actually that we tell everyone. It's just like, make sure you have a general store, because you don't know what's going to work for you. And we also all have different affinities and things that we have more knowledge of. So like, you might do really well with one niche and not as well with another, right? So there's also like your personal preferences. So like, upload different niches, like try as many things as possible. Like at first you're kind of like testing out the waters, right? You don't need any reviews to get sales. If people really like your listing and it really speaks to them, and I'm going to show you guys examples, by the way, they will buy it. You don't need to drive more traffic with Pinterest and Etsy ads unless you have a winner, and you don't need to spend hours uploading thousands of listings. That's another big myth that's out there, that you need to have like 3,000 listings. That's not the case. Like, you just need to be very strategic. You don't need to spend all this time, because that's another thing. A lot of folks are like, oh, I want to better understand how SEO works and how to do my titles and whatnot. And yes, it does matter. But again, like, I will show you listings that have the worst SEO, the worst creative. And because they understood how Etsy works, they get sales. And I'm sure you've seen that as well. If you spend enough time on Etsy, you'll see listings that have the worst tags, the worst titles, and they're racking in the sales. So it's all about originality a lot of times. And again, like I said, you don't need to go after low competition keywords only. So let's break it down. Okay, so overall, here are your goals. You need to kind of put yourself in the shoe of an Etsy customer, and you need to understand what are Etsy shoppers actively searching for. And that is going to change based on different data points, right? Like based on holidays, based on what time of the year it is, based on trends as well, like whether popular trends, like what's happening in the world. Like there's just a lot of factors that's going to drive that data, right? And you always want to find a way to differentiate yourself. Copying does not work. And I'm going to repeat that again. Copying does not work. You cannot copy a bestseller and expect sales. Yeah, you might be able to get a few sales off of them. And that's happened to me. People like copying my listings, and yeah, they get a few sales, but they're not going to get as many sales as I did because I was the first one in the marketplace to come up with that idea. So you have to
by the
create
way,
the desire.
that is completely true for Facebook as well. Copying is, in the long run, copying other designs is not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you anywhere.
And the thing is too, with like Etsy, you know, like if you're the first listing with that creative idea, you're always going to have leeway, right? So if more sellers come in and steal your listing, yeah, they might be able to get a few sales off of you, but long run, like you said, in the long run, it's not really going to do much for you. Like it's not what's going to help you have a consistent business. And then, so you need to essentially, like, really the key is how do you create the perfect listing that understand what the desire is in the marketplace, and you attract these customers with that irresistible listing.
I just want to bring attention to something real quick. So you're highlighting an important marketing principle, and that is a lot of people, especially when you're new to marketing, what you kind of think you're doing is you have a product and then you're getting people to want your product. Like it's actually kind of the opposite. It's like what you're trying to do is you're trying to find a big group of people and you're trying to figure out what they already want, and then you're trying to give them that thing, right? That is clever marketing right there. It's like you don't have to worry about arousing emotion. You don't have to worry about creating desire. You're tapping into it. It's different, right? It's like what you're actually doing is you're basically talking to your prospect and you're saying, hey, you know that thing you already want and you already desire, right? Like that is this thing. That's your job as a marketer. It's just to bridge that. It's to connect those two things.
Exactly.
Anyway, very important distinction, because when you're new in particular, you've got to get that on or you won't make sales. If you want to make a ton of sales, you have to figure out what the mainstream already wants, what big buyer demographics already want, and then give them that thing. Don't make a thing and then try to find somebody to sell to. Find a bunch of people that want something and then give it to them, right? That's
exactly. Yeah, no, and that's exactly how Etsy works, right? So if you look at this, like I pulled like a screenshot for like gift for mom, right? And so obviously some of these sellers have been in the marketplace for a while, so they are getting sales. And so you might look at it and be like, oh, they're getting sales. Let me tap into this. But you're going at it the wrong way, because most sellers and most beginners, what they do is they take this, they're like, oh, they're getting a lot of sales, so let me replicate it. And they simply replicate it and they don't add another aspect to it. They don't really work and they don't find a way to sort of like differentiate themselves. So one easy way, and I'm sure you guys already heard of this tactic, is instead of having a signature that's generic, like to my mom, is coming up with like another signature, right? Something like one that I've seen recently that's actually getting sales is like to my chosen mom, which is for a bonus mom, right? So even something as simple as having like a different signature already will set you apart. And I'll talk more about this, but when you are going after these more competitive niches, you actually need to be more creative. You need to pull data from other places in order for you to get your listing seen, right? And so I have a different angle. So everyone's going after family niches, right? And that's kind of what we're taught, right? Go after family niches. And I'm not necessarily saying you don't, but I have a different angle. I look at trends. I look at what is currently trending on Etsy. What are people into? And then I kind of work backwards from there. And I'm going to show you different examples. There's a book that's really popular right now. It's called A Court of Thrones and Roses. It's Acotar. It's like a series of books. And no, I know what some of you are going to tell me, oh, what about trademark issues? Hold off your horses. Take a like, relax. I have figured it out. But essentially, if you go on Etsy and you do a search for Velaris right now, you're going to be baffled. First and foremost, so this very smart ShineOn seller, whomever you are, I really have to give it to you because this item is actually very generic. And to be quite honest, I'm surprised they got any sales, right? But why did they get sales and why is it in 6 people's cart? Because no one is thinking about this very trending book, which is Acotar Velaris, which don't ask me what it's about because I have no idea. But anyways, like, so it's just like a book that's really popular right now. And so they got a lot of sales during Christmas and it's still going strong. And this is something so simple. So if you were to come in and do something as simple as asking ChatGPT to give you a synopsis of the book, right? Actually add a proper message to something like this, you already have a winner. And somebody can take this idea right now, you'll have a sell. You're welcome. Something as simple as that, you know, like because they thought of it, because you always have to look, and I think this is in business in general, you always have to look where no one else is looking. If everybody, like, it's kind of like the gold rush, right? If everybody's like pointing the finger, hey, there's gold over here, what do you think is going to happen? Everybody's going to run where you're pointing the finger, where in reality, what you should be doing is looking at your surroundings and looking for other opportunities to see if there's any other angle around it. So this is exactly my tactic. And this is what I'm showing you guys, you know, like, and this could also be an opportunity. Like there could be a twist to it where you give this to like a mom or a new mom who's a fan of that specific book, and without getting into any sort of trademark issues, because obviously you have to be clever. Like don't use the same quotes of the books, like reword those quotes. So anybody who is a fan will understand it and know that, you know, that it's speaking about that specific book. But like use ChatGPT or Jasper AI, any sort of AI copywriting tool to help you rewrite these and make it even like more sentimental. But this is a great example of something that, you know, I mean, honestly, like they didn't put much thought into it, but it works because they knew and understood what the Etsy audience wants.
It's really clever. It's really clever.
So this is another one. This actually was like, I think it was last Valentine's. It did really well. And it takes more effort, yes, because you have to have the image upload swapper on. And every time you get new data, you need to like change it around. But there's an app that allows you to create these maps. And again, this is really clever because no one else is doing it. And this is another thing that I was going to say. It's a low-hanging fruit. These days, you know, if you want to get traction with ShineOn, you have to personalize your message card. So instead of saying to my mom, again, going back to like the mom thing, right, which is a more saturated niche, something as simple as adding the name, you know, can make all the difference.
Yeah, I've been, just in case anybody has missed it, I've been highly encouraging this year people start to get into personalization. And it can be as simple as adding a name, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell you the top selling product we had in Q4 was an individual that had a personalized message card. So this is the wave of the future. You have to start thinking about incorporating personalization into your message cards.
Yeah, and that's another thing I want to mention. When it comes to Etsy, personalization is a really big thing. It usually outsells any other gifts, I would say. So again, like don't be just limited to looking at what other ShineOn sellers are doing. You really have to look across the board to get inspired and see what are best sellers on Etsy. Like, so they probably pulled the idea from this. They realized like, oh wow, these custom maps are selling really well. Why don't I put that on a message card? They tested it, it worked. And to this day, it's still a bestseller. They listed it like 2 years ago, I think, or I know it wasn't this Valentine, it was like the previous Valentine's. So just comes to show you really have to get yourself out of this little, what's the best word I can use? Like you have to broaden your horizon, right? Don't be so pigeonholed into only looking at Etsy listings and only looking at the family niche. Like you really have to like look at it from a different lens. Look at it as what are Etsy sellers into and how can I get these items that they're really attracted to, right? Like these items are actually selling. How can I translate that into a ShineOn product?
Yes. Yeah, I dig that. I totally totally dig that. This is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, so this is another example of something, I mean, sorry, my French comes out sometimes, but like, it's cute, but if you were trying to do that for like a Mother's Day gift, it would not work. Like, we all know it's too simple, right? And there's a couple things that don't work with the design as well. Like, you can't really read the text, there's not enough contrast. So why is this selling so well? Because again, like the zodiac horoscope niche is really hot. They went after it. It's kind of a personalized gift, right? Because it's for someone who's born in March, Pisces. But if you were to simply go in, create something that has stronger value from a sentimental standpoint, have a stronger message, and go after the zodiac niche, I mean, there you go. I mean, instead of doing birthday, you do like the zodiac niche. And again, this can have like multiple application. You could also do this for like a Mother's Day gift. Like, so it's just looking at it from a different angle. Yeah, I mean, this is another one where I was in shock, like, wow, 3 cards.
I never would have anticipated this one would sell. That's crazy.
Yeah, but it's because they knew where to look. So this is a really good example, this other one. So obviously this is a different necklace. There's actually a couple ShineOn sellers who replicated this listing, but the reason this does so well, this listing's been around for about a year now. It's an encouragement gift. And so that's another category that does really well on Etsy. Anything that it's like encouraging gifts, right? So instead of, again, writing to my mom, you could have an encouragement gift for your mother, your like granddaughter, whatever it is, right? And obviously don't copy the signature. It's already been done, but try to come up with other signatures that are going to resonate and are going to be encouragement gifts. And I mean, this is a very simple necklace. Like, you could literally do this with any ShineOn necklace. Again, it's like understanding where there's desire on Etsy and then going after the desire and not going at it other way around where you're trying to go after these family niches and you're looking where everybody else is looking and then trying to fit your product in the marketplace. And then you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and you're like, why is it not sticking? And it's like, well, it's not sticking because how is your listing different than everything else that's out there? How do you think you're going to differentiate yourself? That's why most beginners get frustrated with Etsy and they blame Etsy because they're going at it the wrong way. So yeah, data is king. And I'm sure, Michael, you say that all the time as well. Like, data is king. You have to look at your data. You have to know what are people into. And another thing I want to mention is don't limit yourself to just looking on Etsy. I get inspired on Instagram, inspired on Pinterest. I get inspired on TikTok. Everything and everywhere is an opportunity for me to get inspired. I even get inspired at Target. Do you do that, Michael? Like, I'll go at Target.
I'm always looking for opportunities. It never stops. It never stops. Yeah.
When you go to Target, like, they have like these little message card necklaces. I will look at the one that's like the most sold out where there's only one left and I'll literally take a picture. Could even like go in like the message card section, you know, and see the ones where there's like only a few left. Like, you have to get inspired everywhere because you never know where you're gonna find inspiration.
I do it with songs, movies, shows. Like anytime there's something like there's an emotional like beat in a movie and like there's some dialogue going back and forth, like I'm trying to listen in on like why it works, like what allows like that moment to build, because those are all the things that you can take and then like put into phrases and put into your product and try to arouse emotion in other people, get them to cry so they'll buy, right? So I'm kind of I'm just turned on all the time to that stuff.
Yeah, you have to be, because at the end of the day, if your listing is vanilla, and this goes for Facebook or TikTok, it goes for anything. If your listing is vanilla, I hate to break it to you, you're never gonna have sales. Like, so you could bring all the traffic in the world, you're not gonna get any sales. So now I don't want you to feel like overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I'm not that creative, I'm never gonna come up with something. I just showed you guys like specific example of someone who just kind of went a different route. Their listing wasn't even that strong and they're getting sales. Here's what I found. Oh, sorry. My watch is like talking to me. Oh my God. So yeah, the more saturated a niche is, so like the Valentine, like to my boyfriend niche is obviously more saturated, but there's still plenty of opportunities. You just have to be more creative and you have to come up with a different angle. So that's why what I showed, you know, with the map, it just worked well. So essentially, yeah, you need the right formula and you need the right map in order to get to your destination, right? So first is obviously research, understanding what what the shoppers want, really tapping into their desire, like having a listing that is irresistible, that is going to really appeal to the reptilian brain of your customer. So having something that is irresistible, like, oh my God, I'm so into astrology right now. So like, obviously that listing is going to appeal to them because they're really into astrology right now, like zodiac. And I think it probably has to do a lot too with on TikTok, like astrology and like tarot card reading is really in. So that probably is where the trend came from. So like trends really emerge from all places, right? And then you also the analogy that I love to give about Etsy is that Etsy is a big field and you want to plant as many crops as possible. Like obviously be strategic in different places. Or you could also look at as real estate. Real estate is actually probably a better analogy. So if you've ever lived in Manhattan, right? There's certain neighborhoods that are more expensive, like Chelsea, there are more people in those neighborhoods. So obviously there's more at stake. So for those neighborhoods where there's more competition, in order for you to get a little bit of the stake, you have to go at it differently, right? You have to come up with something else. Obviously other neighborhoods where there's less people, it's easier for you to like plant your stake and be like, oh, I'm going to be here, but you might not get as much traffic. So I recommend when it comes to Etsy, you want to like plant different crops in different places. So this is the accumulation of it's going to help you get consistent sales. Then you want to analyze and look at what's working and what's not. So if you have a listing that's getting a lot of favorites, but you're not getting sales, then you need to rework your listing. Like I see people crying to me like, oh, I'm getting all these favorites, but it's not getting sales. Okay, well, that's positive data. Keep moving forward. Like, don't just let the listing die. Like, try to find a way to optimize this listing. Understand why you're not getting sales. And it has nothing to do with price, guys. Again, like price, like that's a narrative that you've built. Because if somebody really likes something and it really speaks to them, they will purchase it. So
100%. By the way, ShineOn would not exist if that weren't true, right?
Exactly.
Because you could find, and by the way, this has been true all the way back to 2016 when we started. You could find any one of our necklaces almost anywhere else on the internet for cheaper. Seriously, that has always existed. The reason ShineOn works is because the products are unique. It's that phrase. If you can move the buyer emotionally when they read it, they'll buy. It doesn't matter about the price anymore, right? And that's all you're saying, the exact same thing. It's a sacred cow. We need to kill it. This whole idea that price is what is the primary motivator of a purchase. It is not.
It's not. It's emotions. So 100%. You really need to tap into that reptilian brain, that desire, right? And then once you have a winner, then you can throw in the ads. Then you can like continue building a brand. Then you can scale your winners. But do not do that until you've figured out your winners. And just like you do with Facebook ads, where you test different ideas, the same needs to happen with Etsy. You need to test different ideas. And when you do get data that people are going to your listing or they're favoriting, that's positive data. So don't just stop there. Continue and continue to upgrade or optimize accordingly.
Tell me if I'm jumping ahead here, but I have a question around this. So, let's pretend you're getting the favorites and you're saying that it's good data coming in. You should go like tweak the listing. What do you mean by tweak the listing though? Do you mean like create a new message card and a new product like with the same phrase? Is that what you mean by the listing? Or do you mean go back with the SEO and the description and stuff?
Oh my God. So that's where it could be frustrating for some. It could be anything, right? So sometimes it can be the design, right? Where it's just not quite there yet, where there's not enough contrast or it's hard to read. Sometimes it's sometimes it's just like the signature that needs work. Sometimes it's the messaging that needs work. So you have to re-upload a few times to kind of get a sense of like what has potential. It's also happened to me actually, like sometimes it takes like a couple days, for you to start getting those sales, because like, especially when you're testing holidays, like it happened to me with one like Valentine's Day listing where I was getting a lot of favorite upfront. And so I started uploading different permutations. And then actually the first one is the one that started getting sales. And it's because I was too early into that holiday shopping.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? So But so yeah, I don't stop when I get favorites. I continue uploading until I get it right. And then two, another thing is if a message working well, don't just get limit. Like let's say it's like a boyfriend message. Well, then try to see if it could work for a girlfriend or a mom or a daughter. Like try to figure out a way for it to work in different niches. Just don't get like, siloed and just that one winner. Like that's when this is your opportunity. You have positive data to start scaling it to like find different opportunities for it.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Okay, so honestly, the roadblocks, like the other roadblocks that I see a lot is people overthinking it, being perfectionist, assuming they know how Etsy works and spending time on like meaningless tasks. I mean, yeah, I guess I get asked a lot taxes and I'm like, did you even get any sales? I mean, I know I sound like a jerk. I don't mean to. Like, I mean, and
no,
again,
no.
I'm in a different.
Hang on, you're not being a jerk at all. Like, you can't. Everybody needs to realize this. You will not succeed if you are not willing to make a little bit to be messy. Like, you need to take imperfect action. You need to move before you have all the data, right? Yeah. Like this tax thing. I would challenge anybody out there worried about taxes. I would challenge you to make it a problem for yourself.
Exactly.
Make so many sales that the taxes are actually a problem for yourself. If you're not in that situation, you probably shouldn't be worrying about taxes at all. I don't think you're being a jerk. It's just truth. I mean, honestly, it's just people need to hear that. Like if you're just getting started, you've got to move forward, one foot in front of the other, and you're gonna have to learn.
Yeah, it's like start doing. And that's the thing with Etsy that I personally love is you can be extremely messy. You don't need to have a store per se. Like, I mean, yeah, you need to have some like personal data and you need to have your credit card. Like you need to have some basics, right? But you literally can have a store in an hour or half an hour. Like that's how easy it is to set up, right? So don't focus on all this other stuff because it really does not matter, right? And also just you're not being consistent. That's another big one.
Yeah, I think this was really good. There's truth there.
And I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I created for you guys like a little sheet, which is really helpful when you're creating a listing, thinking about what problem you're solving. So like if you're giving a gift for someone who perhaps it's like encouragement gift, like what problem are you solving? Maybe that person they're giving a gift to is like somebody who's going through cancer. Like that's another great niche on Etsy, or like somebody who's recovering from a surgery. Then is there data that there's demand for the specific listing? Would my gift make someone laugh or cry? Is it unique? Is it irresistible? So answering all these questions and having like a check mark will help you have a stronger listing that will get you eyeballs. And it all comes down to it. So I want you to stop obsessing over how to make eRank work, which is a Etsy keyword research tool. Like I want you to stop obsessing about that. And I want you instead to focus on where to find opportunities and create irresistible listings. Then the rest, the title, the SEO, all that, yes, it will help, get you more traffic and more eyeballs. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to how irresistible a listing is.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the interview and took some helpful tips away to level up your own Etsy business. If you haven't already, visit ShineOn.com to create an account or hit the link in the description below. It only takes 60 seconds. And until next time, happy selling.